Hi, everyone. This is Chris Fleming with KFP Investors, your very favorite mortgage brokerage for investment real estate. We'd love to chat with you about it. I am here with Mr. Brian Galkey, and I want to tell you how we met. But of course, I have to give our legal disclaimer first. So here we go. KFP Investors LLC does not give legal, tax, economic, or investment advice. We disclaim all liability for the action or inaction taken as a result of communications from or to its employees, contractors, clients, prospective clients, or participants. Each person should consult their own counsel, accountant, and other advisors as to legal, tax, economic, investment, and other advice. Thanks for letting me get that out of the way. So KFP Investors recently sponsored an event in Nashville geared towards entrepreneurs. It was called Impact. It was hosted by Mr. Jim Morris. Brian was one of the speakers at the event. He gave an absolutely fascinating presentation on the art of how to decode facial features. Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself and a high level of what you do.
Sure. So I'm Brian Galkey. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I'm learned this skill back in 2010 through fluke circumstances. A friend came into town. She said, "Hey, let's go to dinner." I show up to the restaurant, and she no-shows. And then she calls. She's like, "Oh, wait, we need to change plans." And I was being stubborn. I'm like, "No, I'm not going to change plans." And she's like, "You got to come meet this guy." I'm like, "Why do I need to come meet this guy?" She's like, "Because he decodes facial features." I'm like, "Oh yeah, let me rush over there for that one." And, I went over there with a chip on my shoulder because this guy ruined my plans. And I thought, you know what? I've got tons of books over here, body language, you name it, how to win friends and influence people. I've never heard of this. So it's got to be BS. And I was waiting. I thought, oh, this guy's going to use generic statements like, "Oh, you've had a hard time in life," or, somebody whose name starts with S, Susie. So I was just prepared, right? And instead, he was the nicest guy, and he sat us all down at dinner, and he went person by person and basically dissected us to a T, including me. And I immediately went from arms crossed and leaned back to wait, what is this? Because it was the first proactive skill I had ever seen. All the books, body language, disc assessment, everything is reactive. You have to be around people and pay attention, they're all valuable skills. Matter of fact, I'm going to give 3 books I'm currently reading or recommend that cover body language and paying attention to people. But this was the first one which gave me the proactive advantage of, if I knew who I was going to meet with, I would go find a picture of them and start thinking, how do I need to tailor my presentations for that person? And it changed my life because growing up, I'm an introvert, but I love to be out in public. So I call myself an introvert extrovert because I love to be around people, but I was terrified to be around people at the exact same time. And I still have introvert tendencies, but when I focus on you, I'm not focused on me. And that's what changed things. Is I figured out when I was walking up to someone networking, I could start looking at their facial features and figuring out, okay, I know what I want to say, but how do I best speak their language? And when this happened, I stopped thinking about me because I was making it about the interaction. And you heard me talk about this in Nashville, which, by the way, Impact Effect, Jim put together such an amazing event. But what I talked about was, these phones connect us to the world, but disconnect us from each other. And in one of the books that I'm going to recommend here a little bit, they did a study in the FBI. They had 2 people that were in class come up to the front and they said, "All right, just have a conversation." And people are like, I don't know what to talk about. They said, "Okay, now stand back to back and text each other." And they had a full conversation. That's where we're going. Technology is great. But the reason that we shy away from face-to-face communication is because we can perfect our messages. With our text messaging and everything, we're not thinking about it. We're just saying whatever we want, and we're only focused on our message instead of the interaction with people. And look, I'm guilty of it. I have my phone in my hands half the time too. So it's not to sound superior or anything. It's just I'm trying to pay more attention to people. And even with being in speaking, I can go into a room of 5 or 500, and by looking at the people and giving them my time and attention, I'm creating a bond with those people. And it's always funny because I sit in there, and sometimes when I'm talking, like at Impact, some of the people who sit there with their arms crossed, and I think, oh man, this is not going well when talking to them, are the first people to come up afterwards and go, "This is amazing. How can I learn more? What can you tell me about me?" So that's why, a lot of body language that we hear, isn't always true. So crossed arms doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It could be that's how they're comfortable. Does their back hurt or anything? But I loved it because this helped me in so many aspects, personally, professionally, and we'll talk a little bit about more of how it took me from being an introvert on the help desk to a regional vice president of sales, including being flown around the US for any customer over $1 million. I was part of a 3-person team to go do presentations and win business. And
Wow.
and we'll actually talk about what the facial features tell you and how to interact with someone to create and build that rapport.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So how did you told us about going to dinner and meeting this person. So how did you like dive in? How did you come to be an expert in this field?
Luckily for me, he lives 45 minutes away from me. So I live in Dallas. He lives in Fort Worth. And so when you hear people say, hey, DFW, it sounds like they're neighboring cities. It's still a 45-minute drive to get from Dallas to Fort Worth, but he was luckily close by. And so all through 2011, twice a month, he would have group coaching and I would drive from here to there. So I bought his book. And the book, the reason I don't recommend it over the flashcards is because it's too overwhelming if you aren't sitting with him when you have the book. Because I'll show you an example of it. If you were to buy his brand new book, which I still recommend people get, it's called The Power of Face Reading. But when you look at it, it's too many features. Let me see if I can get it's too many features all at once to learn.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not sitting with him, then you're not learning it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I actually went and had sat with him, like I had the ability, this is my book from 2010. We'll see if we can get it to show up. And you can see all the highlighting and everything that I did so I could learn the material. And that's what it takes is somebody has to sit with him. However, what I bought that had the best advantage was I bought the flashcards. And what I did is I learned one facial feature at a time. I would take a card with me and I would say, okay, who has this in the room? And I'd find it and go, just like any other flashcard when you're a kid, I'd find the feature first and then I'd flip it over and go, okay, what does that mean again? Now, what I also did is I recruited a buddy to do it with me. And so then we'd go out to places and be like, okay, what do you see on the server? What do you see on the bartender? What do you see on this? And that the gamification of it is helped it ingrain that much more. And so then in 2012, I worked with them to get certified, but then I only used it for personal gain, both personally and professionally. I kept getting promotions at work, kept winning new business at work. So that comes with financial benefits as well. But even going out and talking to people, instead of getting stuck in that introverted head, I started thinking, I'm going to test this stuff. I'm going to play with it. And people go, oh, it's manipulation. No, it's not. It's like going to another country. You can either go there and speak English. And like when I was younger, I'd go and I'd speak English. And if they didn't, I'd speak English louder. Like somehow that's going to help. Right? Or you can learn basic phrases in their language and then they're going to try and speak your language. And that's literally what changed things for me traveling as well. Now, everywhere I go, I have good morning, good evening, please, thank you, where's the bathroom, those kinds of phrases, because it's still helping me reach my goal, but it's showing respect for asking for their help. And faces are the exact same way. So when you start looking at people and go, oh, well, this is how I do something, but how did they do it? Do I need to speak the same message because we have the same facial features? Or do they have different facial features? And do I need to change the message to help make sure it's communicated properly? That's where the real game changer for it comes in. And people so misunderstand it. Like I do post, here, I'll show you in a second where to find me. But when I put posts up, people go, oh, this is about judgment. And this is what, this is what happens when you hurt people. I'm like, no, do the research. This has been around since the Greeks. And it's actually used to understand people, not judge them. So I like to say, I do a lot of rhymes. It's probably from growing up with Dr. Seuss days. I like to say, with the face comes grace. And so things that used to bother me before, I just realized, oh, that's how they think and process information instead of going, how dare them? And we'll talk about that when it comes to low eyebrows here in a minute.
I like it. So what made you want to share this gift?
2019, my wife had a project in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we had a 2-year-old at the time. And we said, okay, well, rather than her leaving every Monday and coming home every Friday, what if we moved the whole family to Scottsdale for 90 days? And we did that. Well, the territory I had was the Midwest Central region, so I could still do that because I had to fly to all my customers anyway. So I had to prove to the company that even my relocation didn't cost them anything extra, just cost me more time in the air. And they were cool with it. But her company said, well, if this really works out, we may move you everywhere. Well, shoot, I wanted to support her and her career. but I knew my company wouldn't pay for that. So I reached back out to my mentor and I said, hey, Mac, I would love to be able to teach this to other people, but I want to be able to do it under my own name because you've earned your name. And I don't want to ever to blemish or it be associated like me pulling from it, but I want to teach the skill. And to his credit, he said, Brian, the reason I wrote the book is because I want more people to learn this. I could have kept it to myself, but I realized what a powerful skill it is. And my mission is to share it with more people. He's like, you can absolutely do it. Well, 2020 wasn't exactly the best time to start speaking, right? Because everything shut down unless you're on Clubhouse. But I did start talking on Clubhouse, and that was another way that I started refining my message was podcasts and Clubhouse.
Yeah.
And, because I'd tell somebody, okay, well, let me go look in, and we'd get on Clubhouse. And for anybody who doesn't know, it was an app that really blew up during the pandemic, where you got on, you had audio conversation. So it was like being at a mastermind, but you could talk at the same time. So I used to love going to seminars. It's kind of like being in an audio seminar, but you could raise your hand and be brought up to be a speaker as well. So I've been and I'd go into rooms and say, hey, we're going to analyze features for a little while. And because everybody had their LinkedIn, their Instagram linked to Clubhouse, because Clubhouse didn't have its own like profile, we go, okay. And I'd go and find somebody on my iPad right next to me here. And I would say, okay, this is what I can tell on your face. And people were giving feedback for it. And that was one of the ways that it became more prevalent, so that when the world opened back up in 2021, I started speaking for free. So I would actually go, I had a corporate job at the time. I was regional vice president of sales. So if I got asked to speak, I wouldn't take any money. And then I would take a vacation day off work. So I was doing this passion project while I was employed at the same time. And then I got fired a year ago. So 11/30 of last year, I got fired after 21 and a half years. And I gave myself a day to be mad. And I said, how'd this happen for me? And every excuse is to not chase my passion was, well, I make really good money at my job. So I said, all right, that's it. So I cashed out one of my 401ks and just hit the gas. And I've been doing this ever since.
That's amazing. I have heard that story. I have a similar story that losing my job was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Yes.
Those golden handcuffs, we can grieve over them, or we can go pursue what we wanted to do all along anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We make a lot of excuses for why we're going to stay in our comfort zone. And truthfully, if they hadn't fired me, I'd probably still be there and be miserable like I was.
Same.
And has it been easy? No. Do I need to like regain financial, things? It's not as full of, well, here's a weird thing. If you've ever gone from a full-time job where you're working, 40 to 60 hours a week, to all of a sudden you're in control of your own schedule, you're kind of like, what do I do? Because you were always told what to do.
Yes. Yeah. I do remember when I was first starting KFP Investors, that it was kind of okay, how do I manage my own schedule when nobody's telling me you have to be here at this time and this is your location? And now Piper, my our branch assistant, and she is working on her first couple of files as a loan originator. Now she tells me where to be and when. She sets my schedule. So she actually reached out to me about 5 minutes before our meeting and said, "Are you ready?" to make sure I remembered.
Right.
So Piper's fantastic.
That's great.
Well, Brian, will you give us an introductory lesson?
Absolutely. Let me share the screen here. Window. Where is my PowerPoint? So we're actually going to go through what was we met in Nashville, but I'm going to go a little bit faster than I normally would, just because I know we have only got so much time here. So first screen here is what's the name of the company? It's called Subtle Skills. We kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. Who am I? I'm Brian Galkey. Like a nickname that people give me is the people problem solver. Because when you can't just figure out like, what do I do with this client? What's going wrong? I'm sharing my message, but it's not reaching them. That's where this skill comes in to really help other people. We're going to cover a lot today. So what you can basically do is follow me. I'm Subtle Skills everywhere. And the reason for that I didn't do Brian Galkey, honestly, is because at first I had imposter syndrome. So even though I'd been using this for 13 years, it was easier for me to put it under a company name than it was to put under my name. So on LinkedIn, it's just me. It's Brian at Subtle Skills. If you have questions, the QR code, if you're watching this, is basically where you can scan it. It'll take you to get a cheat sheet of everything that we're going to talk about today. So I will go a little bit fast for time's sake, but you'll get the idea. So the first part is, what's the worst thing that people are going to get out of this today is how to get free food, drink, upgrades in airports and hotels. When you learn to pay attention to other people and you speak to them in their language, you make them feel seen and heard. That's the best part. That's the best benefit of it. Sometimes what comes along with that is people have the power to make things happen. And so when I go in, and for example, when I travel, I always sit at the bar to eat. Why? Because why sit at a table by yourself? But there's always interesting people when you sit at the bar. So when I'm ordering dinner, I also talk to the bartender about, hey, here's how you can use this skill to, make a little more money. Well, as I'm teaching to it, and all of a sudden, then they bring out another server, then they bring out the manager, and then they bring out somebody else. And next thing you know, they'll go, can I get you anything? You're like, yes, you can. And it's really funny. In the book, I'm going to recommend a little bit later. It's called The Like Switch here. It's written by an FBI agent on how they taught agents how to recruit assets over and flip people to come work for the U.S. and everything. But in the book, he's talking about the same thing. If you treat people nicely and you focus on them, it's amazing what they can provide you with. And so we'll go over at the end, hotel upgrades and airline upgrades. How did I get started into it? As a kid, I wanted to work on projects with my dad and everything, but we couldn't communicate because he'd say things like, go get me the thing. And I didn't know what the thing was. And so those, what I thought would be high five projects, ended up in a lot of anger towards them. So as an introvert, what does every good introvert do? I thought, well, I should learn to over communicate with people. So I picked up books, I took seminars, went and listened to speakers. But the body language was the first one that really, really stuck with me. So I'm going to recommend 2 books here in a minute. But body language, again, is focusing on other people. And when you're doing that, you're not stuck in your head. You're not thinking about what I'm going to say next. You're paying attention to what's going on in the room. But that's a reactive skill. So when I met Mac in 2010, and he taught me this proactive skill that people's faces will tell you a little bit about them, absolutely changed my life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a huge Batman fan. I don't think this is the tool. It's just a tool to help you reach your goals. But I'm going to recommend books of different shades of everything. So why is it called an unfair advantage? Because oddly enough, everybody knows how to decode facial features, but nobody's been formally taught. Yeah, feedback there. Complete strangers, you can use it at work. You can use it to negotiate contracts with vendors. Most importantly, you can use it with friends and family. And that's where even existing relationships that you have, when you learn to look at somebody differently, some of the things that drive you nuts about them now, you actually learn to appreciate and go, that's just how they're wired. Mm-hmm. Industries I've used it on, you name it. So we'll talk in a minute about how to use this in real estate, since with everything you guys do. But you name it, door-to-door, roofing, automotive, real estate. Yes, I have a dating course called Looking for Love and All the Wrong Faces.com. Because during the pandemic, what happened? Everybody was sending me pictures going, what does this face say? And after doing it for so long, I'm like, I'm just going to create a course so I can send them to that.
I love it.
Yeah. Why is it even more important? Because just like today, right now, you and I are on Zoom. Zoom took away so many of the skills that we're used to. Like now, a lot of people use the fake background, so you can't ask them, oh, well, what's this about? What's that in your background that I see? So it kind of took away a lot of the skills that when I was being groomed through sales that I was taught to use. Look for around their office, look for pictures, look for sports emblems, try and find commonalities. Mm-hmm. Well, now pay attention to their body language. I can't tell, are your arms crossed, your legs crossed? With Zoom, you wonder if they're even wearing pants, right? They're covered.
I would just like to say that I am.
There you go. So am I. So, but then the other thing, like when going through airports now, some people are wearing masks again while they travel. Even with this much real estate, your audience is going to learn today, what can they tell about someone from just this part here? Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned earlier, the big change for me was I used to be like the person on the left who I was so focused on my message and why you should buy my product, because I used to do presentations to the telecommunications space. But what I realized is when I was so focused on me, they would just pick up their phone and they're like, okay, well, they're not really paying attention to me. But when I started focusing on them and analyzing their facial features and their body language, they knew I was present in the moment and I wasn't making it about me, and it was a game changer. Mm-hmm. So some quick questions I get asked. I'm not a wizard. I can't read palms and I can't predict the future. Those are always come up. The other one I get is, well, can you tell me who's a liar and who's a cheater? No, that's more body language and micro expressions. I mean, there are some giveaways, but there's nothing on someone's face that says, oh, you're automatically a liar. No, what you want is you want to pay attention to body language that is incongruent with the words that they're saying. So what's it based on? It's based on physiognomy. It's been around since the Greeks. And what the easy way to understand is the mind creates movement, movement creates muscle. So those 42 muscles in the face, as you keep making faces, will adjust over time. So when our parents said, stop making that face or it'll get stuck that way, there's actually some truth to it. Where did I learn it? I mentioned earlier, running into this gentleman, Mac Fulford, changed my life. The coolest thing about Mac was he was an attorney who learned it for jury consulting and ended up loving it so much he walked away from his law practice and actually taught it around the world.
Wow.
And yeah, I was lucky enough to meet the guy. And TCU is Texas Christian University. It's a very prestigious college here in Texas. And he actually had it added as a continuing education class for a while as well. Here's the crazy part. I mentioned it earlier. We talk about faces all the time. We say things like take one on the chin, keep a stiff upper lip, keep your nose to the grindstone. You've got eyes for this. You've got ears for this. Highbrow humor, lowbrow humor. We talk about faces nonstop, but we don't pay attention to it. Well, faces are really cool because faces are a map that tell us where's someone been and where are they today. And what I mean by that is when somebody has lines or wrinkles, that's usually where they've been or what they may have been through. And then today is where are your facial features. We're going to look at my own face and how much it's changed in 20 years. And it's pretty dramatic changes, not just the hair part, but a whole lot of other things too. Here's why I say everybody's an amateur. Every book you ever read as a kid, the author had only two ways to describe characters because they didn't have a picture of every character in the book. The only way to describe them was through their actions and through their facial features. So especially if we read older things, it wasn't their Gucci bag and their Lamborghini. It was like men wore suits, women wore dresses. And that was pretty much it. So they had to learn to describe the characters through their actions and through their facial features. Artists also took classes in physiognomy because they had to know how do you describe characters that don't exist in real life. So how should we draw witches? How should we draw villains? How do we draw heroes, right? For comic books, fairy tales, you name it. So that's why you can turn on any Disney show and you know who's the hero and who's the villain before they even say a word, right? And that's why there's twists. I mentioned earlier, I have a daughter, so she likes Frozen. Well, it turns out one of the guys, actually, he is a villain at the end, but you don't pay attention to it. But if you looked at some of the facial features, you would have caught on a little bit sooner.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. That's why, we went to Disney World for her 4th birthday. And if you walk around and look at the original cartoon version of The Little Mermaid, and what's her name? Not Cruella, that's a different one. The lady who takes the voice of the mermaid, Ariel's voice, she has all angled features and a pointy chin and a pointy nose. And that's what we expect to see on witches, vampires, things of that nature. So they draw a lot of features that if you have one or two of those features, I just go, okay, you have one. But if you see several features that mimic what you see in a Disney show, as could be a villain, it's somebody I'd pay attention to. Now, I wouldn't automatically judge them, but I'm going to pay more attention than I would somebody else. It's kind of crazy. And don't worry, if you guys are listening and you think, I'm not too sure about this, look, I was skeptical too. Like I said, I went to go blow holes in the guy, but I've been using it now for close to 13 years, and it's not 100%, but it's in the high 90s. And where a lot of people get turned off is when they Google it, it says it's a pseudoscience. Well, it's true because in order for it to be a science, it has to be 100% and replicated all the time. But body language, for example, we talked about arms crossed. There is no scientific thing that says arms crossed always means this. Instead, it's, well, we've observed that when someone crosses their arms, this tends to be what it is. It's not 100%. Neither is statement analysis, neither are micro expressions, so nothing is 100%, but people only see what they want to see, right? Like human nature is, our brains want to categorize things. So as soon as we see something, we go, oh, nope, pseudoscience, let's get rid of it. So I love to get into debates when people say that, and I'll just go, pick up a book. If you don't like it, you've wasted $20. But I guarantee you it'll change your life. So the first questions come out, what about genetics? You are 60% what you inherited from your genetic code, but from the moment we're born, the outside world impacts us in what's known as epigenetics. So that's outside environment that has an impact on us down to a DNA level. So an example like this is the guy in the yellow. Well, he's got big upper body, little tiny legs. Well, that's not what he was genetically born with. That's what muscles he chose to move, and that dude skipped leg day, right? And we see this all the time in people. So faces are no different. If you keep making a face, that muscle memory is going to change and alter your face over time. and the muscles you don't use, then they disappear. And a good example of that is what happens when somebody gets sick. Their cheeks sink in, right? That's because the muscle's not needed, and their energy that they have them up and moving around and things dissipates, and so that goes in. So our faces are constantly adjusting to our outside environment. You can take identical twins raised in the same household, same parents, but those have little subtle differences in their face. It's kind of crazy. I mentioned earlier, I always show a picture of me. Why? Because if we're doing this on stage, like when I was in Nashville, nobody wants to look at you again once they know what you do. So I plaster my ugly mug up there as well and go, hey, look, we're going to analyze my face first. So if you've looked at me, now if I look at you later, we're even. So you see the two pictures here. Is the first picture is me back at 18 when I had hair, right? Really tall hair, because that was Vanilla Ice days. But what you notice is my ears used to stick out more than they do now. You also know my eyebrow is angled, whereas it used to be straight. And then the one that you won't really see until somebody points it out is my eye now angles more up, but when I was a kid, it angled down. We're going to talk about what that means here in just a minute. All right, so people ask all the time, what about surgery or Botox? If you have plastic surgery, you're changing how you want the world to see you, which then has that reciprocal effect of you get treated that way. So the number one plastic surgery right now is upper lip enhancement. Why? Because this is known as your personal lip. So we actually say the phrase, keep a stiff upper lip, when we want someone to be stoic or not to talk or share their emotions. So people who have a thinner or flatter lip are getting their lips done so that they seem to be more approachable. And we subconsciously know that because we say the phrases like, oh, well, look, they're thin-lipped, or, oh, look, you know, they always keep a stiff upper lip. So we know subconsciously, oh, we've been taught through everything we read and what we've been told, if somebody has a flatter lip, don't ask them a lot of personal questions immediately. And it's funny because once you realize that about someone, then you can keep it strictly transactional and they won't be offended. But if somebody has a fuller upper lip and you do that, not going to work out well for you. And then Botox, it just paralyzes the muscles temporarily. Why do you have to go and get Botox put in again? Because it is a temporary what? Muscle paralyzer. So then it comes back right after that. All that they're learning today, it's like getting a new set of glasses that when you put them on, you learn to see people differently. It's not something you have on all the time. Like I don't walk up to people and instantly start going, well, let me see. But when I want to, I can. And that's the best part about it. So if let's say I'm somewhere and I start getting distracted, instead of looking away, I'm thinking, oh, well, what shape is their eyebrow? How high or low is their ear? And it keeps me in the moment with the person because I'm not telling them what I'm doing. I'm just focused on them and they can feel seen and heard. I mentioned earlier, it was the first proactive skill I've ever met. It can be used reactive as well. So if I'm going to do a networking event where I don't know anyone, then I immediately just go top to bottom, left to right. I read people like I read a book. If I know who I'm going to meet with, I go look them up on social media, find a LinkedIn picture. Like this is Bradley, one of my mentors. Every one of those features tells me a little bit something about him. Same thing with Steve Sims, another one of my mentors. Now, what I'm going to show you is Jim, since you know Jim. So this is the gentleman who impact effect. So when you first look at this picture that is in his LinkedIn, you can't see a whole lot. Like I can see he's got a little bit of a flatter upper lip, like we talked about, and he's got a large chin. So large chins, when we say take one on the chin, I know if I have bad news to discuss or anything, I don't have to walk on eggshells around him. It just is the way it is, right? So, but then what I did is I didn't like that picture. So I went and Googled him and found even more pictures of him that tell me that much more information. So he's got, now I can see the self-will pad area here. He's got rounded eyebrows. He's got ears versus eyes, larger ears, smaller eyes. And then again, you see that thinner upper lip and that strong jaw that we already talked about. So that's why you start researching people. And I start on LinkedIn because LinkedIn lets me know who I'm looking for. Because some people don't take pictures by themselves. So if I went to their Facebook or Instagram, I'm wondering, well, which one is she? Or which one is he? So I started on LinkedIn, but what are LinkedIn? Sometimes they're professional photos. So what do? They change the facial features. They airbrush things, wrinkles away, or they'll actually invert the face. And it's important to know which side of their face am I looking at. And we'll talk about that here in a moment.
Okay.
So, and last but not least, I'm going to offend some people here. Realtors sometimes are the worst about having a picture of them that was from like 10 to 15 years ago. All their stuff. And I want to know, who are they today, not who were they 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So, this is what I love about it. Look, they're both important. Body language is good. Analyzing faces is good. but you have to pay attention that you're not the person on bottom who's only staring down and away, because when people don't get eye contact, they assume you're distracted. So by analyzing facial features, I'm looking at you like this instead of looking down going, okay, what's going on? You know, that's so when we say, hey, my eyes are up here, there's kind of some importance to that. I mentioned I'm constantly picking up on books. These are three. The first two changed my life a long time ago. You met Janine. She was one of the speakers there at the event as well.
Yeah.
What's funny is I bought her book when I was in Texas. I mentioned earlier that moving to Arizona, I was in Barnes & Noble in Arizona. I saw this book on body language. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get this book. And I read it while I was there and came home and found out I already had it in Dallas. So apparently I was meant to be friends with Janine. And then this other book, Janine's book is about what does my body language say about me when I walk into a room. So it's examining your own body language. Then Joe's book, What Every Body is Saying, is about what does everybody else's body language tell me about them. So they make a great combination of books that you can read back to back. Focus on yourself, because like we were talking about with Zoom and everything, we hunch our shoulders. You know, what drives me nuts in Zoom is how many people talk like this. And I realize I've got a big monitor here. But if I did this to you in person and the whole time we're talking, I'm just like, yeah, you'd think, hey, you're not paying attention to me. So people have to be cognizant to look at the camera. I've got a buddy.
And I'm not. I'm looking at you on the screen. You're absolutely right.
Right. So it's something we have to pay attention to. Here's a simple hack. My buddy Joe gets a Post-it note and draws an arrow on it and sticks it right in front of the camera to go, look, this is where I should be looking the whole time. That was this finger, by the way. I know it looked bad. But it's a simple way. And then the last one, the light switch I mentioned earlier, it's my new current read. So it's an ex-FBI agent who was over the behavioral analysis group that actually taught classes for new recruits on how to come in and build bonds with people and then eventually try and flip them and stuff. So it's so far I'm halfway through it at 103 pages. And it's really good. So I'd highly recommend that one. Here's an example of it for anybody who's heard The Voice or has not seen The Voice. It starts out with everybody listening. If they like the artist that they hear, they turn around to see what they look like after they say, yes, I'm going to work with that person. Well, that makes perfect sense to me, because you look at these 4 judges and you may see 4 celebrities, but what I see is 4 people who have larger ears and smaller eyes. So when you see that on person, I'm not comparing all of them together. You look at each person's individual facial features and say, in proportion to their own size of their face, are their ears large or small? Are their eyes large or small? So I'm not comparing ears to eyes, because ears are always bigger than eyes. But in proportion to their face, do they have large eyes, small eyes? Do they have large ears, small ears? Well, all 4 of these, when you look at them, large ears, small eyes, large ears, small eyes, large ears, same thing. So you know they're auditory people. So I would say auditory things when I talk to them, like, hey, does this sound like a good idea? Do you hear where I'm coming from? Hey, come listen to this. Or, hey, I've got something I want you to listen to, right? You're saying auditory phrases. I'm visual. I will literally hang up the phone call and say, okay, I'll see you later. So it's crazy. So, but when you're doing proposals and marketing, make sure you have auditory, visual, and kinesthetic material in your stuff at the exact same time. So I know I'm going to go a little bit faster here. So giving people some tactical information, we're going to talk about eyebrows today, or what I call just browsing. And if you don't think eyebrows are important, I always tell people, go and Google people without eyebrows. So they always pick celebrities. And as you can see here, like Nicolas Cage doesn't, I know who he is, but he just doesn't look right without eyebrows. And people go, oh, well, that's just because it's celebrities and you're so used to them. Okay. Who do you want? Do you want to talk to her? Right. And so that's how important eyebrows are. We pay more attention to them than we think we do. And that started with, as a matter of fact, it's in this book. The first thing that we look for when we see someone across the room is, do they do an eyebrow raise and lower, like an acknowledgement, or do they not? So we've always paid attention to eyebrows. So I think they call it an eyebrow flip or flare or something like that. But we always pay attention to eyebrows, because eyebrows lead also to intent. Are they furrowed brow? Are they looking? Is that angry? Or do they, oh, hey. So we pay way more attention to eyebrows than we think we do. And they tell us how people take in and process information. So I mentioned earlier, we always talk about facial features. There's highbrow humor and lowbrow humor. Highbrow humor is when somebody tells you a joke, and it takes you a minute to get the joke, and then you laugh. Lowbrow humor is like Jackass or Three Stooges, instantly funny, physical comedy. So when you start looking at people, and like this lady here, she has a higher eyebrow, then I know she's going to take time to get the joke or take time to get the information. So if you picture data racing down your forehead to get into your eye, The higher the eyebrow, it can only go so fast, go over the speed bump, and try and speed up again. So know when you're looking at a room, give them more time. So salespeople love to come in and go, oh, I'm going to do a one-call close, or we're going to push this paperwork through. I'm going to get that decision today. If you do that to somebody who has higher eyebrows, then they're either going to have buyer's remorse and back out of the deal, or they will never refer you again because you violated like there. You pushed your own agenda instead of focusing on them and thinking, how do they take in and process information? Now, on the inverse of that, if you see somebody whose eyebrows so close to their eye, data races down their forehead, they want you to get there as soon as possible. So if you got 30 minutes on their calendar, get there in 5 minutes and let them ask questions. So I still have the same goal, right? I want them to use me for a loan, or I want to sell them a house. I want them to buy and use me. Well, I have that same agenda, but I'm going to adjust my pitch and my presentation based on what their faces tell me. So when I go in and do these presentations for groups over $1 million, the first thing I do when I went into a room is how high or low are their eyebrows. The higher the eyebrows, the person I'd start with. And I'd work my way to the lower eyebrow person. Why? Because I know they're going to make a decision fast, but I know they're going to need more time. So I would just start using these skills. And so if you were to start looking at this group, I would start with number 4. Why? Because she has the highest eyebrows in the room. Then I'd go to number 3. And then 1, 2, and 5 are close enough that I would treat them the same. So literally when I was doing these presentations, I knew who to make eye contact with and who to start talking to first. And it's not always about who's the decision maker, because if it's an evaluation committee, you need a group consensus, right? So that's how you can use the high and the low skill. We're going to cover one more thing, which is the 3 basic shapes of eyebrows, which are straight eyebrows, angled eyebrows, and rounded eyebrows. So if you see straight eyebrows, think get straight to the point, facts, figures, data. So in real estate, what's interest rate? What's the monthly payments? If you're talking about the house, what are you looking for? A 3.3, a 2.2? What square footage are you looking for? Mathematical type situations. So get straight to the point. If they have angled eyebrows, what's my angle? Help them understand it before they make a decision. So what's the most important room to you in a house? What is it you're looking for in a loan? Ask them and include them in the process. Don't just present the information to them. And people go, oh, well, that's narcissistic. No. So it's kind of like when you're on an airplane, you have to put on your own mask first before you can help other people. So when you see angled eyebrows, just think, what's their angle? Help them understand it so then they can go help other people. So you look at Ruth Ginsburg here, what she wanted to help women, she had to go to law school first, then she could help women. She couldn't just help people right away. I got the angled eyebrow when I became a corporate trainer and the presenter. Why? I had to learn the material first so I could explain it to other people. So I had to know what's in it for me. What's my angle on the information so that I can help other people learn how to use our product. And then you have rounded eyebrows. Think about the people around them. So going back to the airline example, these are people that we have to tell them to put on their own mask. They try and help everyone else until they passed out in the aisle. So when you see rounded eyebrows, they think about the people around them first and themselves second. So going back to the real estate, right? Instead of saying, what's your favorite room in the house? Oh, who are the spare bedrooms for? Do you plan to entertain in the house? You make it about other people first. What are the other rooms going to be used for? Then you come back and say, okay, now what's important to you in the house once we've got those other areas covered? So you're still selling the same product, but you're asked questions differently so that they can be heard by the person you're talking to. No different than the 5 love languages. Dr. Chapman said, the barriers to communication are broken down when you learn to speak someone else's language. So you still have the same product that you want to do. So I used to sell technology equipment. I knew the product, but I had to think, how would they best hear why the product is good, right? So that information's there. How much more time do we have?
Oh, I'm so fascinated. We have about 15 minutes.
All right, perfect. So then I'll show you one other thing that was a huge help to me after we talk about these. So now going from left to right, you go, okay, here's an angled eyebrow. What's her angle? Then straight eyebrow, get straight to the point. Rounded eyebrow, help her think about the people around her first, coworkers, friends, family, you name it. Angled eyebrow, what's her angle? Help her understand it. And then his is hard to tell, so that's what we call kind of a non-read. So it looks more straight, but I can't tell if that angle's down or is that just the shadow of the room. So you don't have to go, oh, it's absolutely this. This is just the basics. I could talk about eyebrows for half a day because there's that much information and material that I learned, but we just want people to learn the basics to walk away with today. So You start looking at people differently. So you look at the girl on the left. What does she have? High, rounded eyebrows. So what does she need? More time to make a decision and make it about the people around her. What is the gentleman in the middle? Low, straight eyebrows. So get straight to the point, facts, figures, data as soon as possible. Stop talking and let them ask questions. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What does she have? Well, she's got one of each. She's got a straight eyebrow on her left, and she's got an angled eyebrow on her right. That's because everyone's a little two-faced. So what do we mean by that is everybody has two sides of their face. We have a personal side and we have a professional side. Doesn't matter where you're born, doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. This is always the left side, which is a personal side. An easy way to remember is to say, hey, are you married? That's a personal question. This is always the professional side because it has to do with right brain versus left brain thinking. And people go, oh, that can't be true. If you've ever seen someone have a stroke, they don't get a stroke horizontally on their face. They have it vertically. They have a stroke on one side or the other. And that's where the right brain versus left brain comes in. So now you just have to know, not just are they high or they low, but which side am I talking to? Is it a personal decision or a professional decision? Because not everybody's symmetrical. So kind of going back to the girl here, you talk to her differently at home versus how you talk to her at work. So when you start seeing examples of that, going here, I love this question. What shapes the first guy's eyebrows?
I think they're rounded.
They are. Now, here's what's funny. The reason you pause for a second is because his glasses are in the way, right?
Yes.
But we choose glasses that mimic our eyebrows a majority of the time. Now, sunglasses don't fall into this category at all because sunglasses are about style. But if you look, rounded eyebrows, rounded glasses. Straight glasses, straight eyebrows. So people's glasses, even from far away, will tell you how do they take in and process information. Now, it's not always the case because some people just go to Walmart and buy the readers to help them out or whatever. But if people have spent the time to pick out their glasses, they tend to mimic what their eyebrow shape is. I have a buddy who has what they call chameleon eyebrows, and he wears clear glasses. I'm like, dude, you're proving my point even so much more. So chameleon eyebrows are where we can't see a defined shape. And so we just assume that they're just like us. And what do we love? People who are like us. So come over to the next girl. You can see rounded on this side, angled on this side. So at work, what's the angle? Rounded on her personal side. She has angled, and he's got angled and angled. So you start thinking, how would I talk to all these people? So for him, I'm going to talk about why this particular product is such an, or well, let's use loans as an example, right? Why this is the ideal loan for everyone in their family, right? Here, these are the facts and the terms of the loan. Over here, because it's a personal decision, I'm going to focus again about why it's the best thing for her and her family and not make it just about why it's the best loan for her. Over here, what's her angle? This is the reason that we chose this loan for you. And same thing for him over here. So you just learn to start talking things or use an example of the house again. If they're coming to say, they're purchasing a house, rounded eyebrows, who's going to come here? Are you going to entertain? You plan to grill out in the backyard? Straight, what are you looking for? 3.322 interest rate payment. Rounded again, ask her the same thing. What are the other rooms for? Do you plan to entertain? Angle. What's the most important room for you in the house? What's the most important feature for you when purchasing a new location? So you're still providing the same service, but you're speaking their language.
I love it.
Yeah. So now what if this is a couple that comes in? So this is a couple that came into an RV dealership, but if they came in, you'd have to talk to them differently. So what you would present to her and ask her questions about is different from what you'd ask him. And so you can still be in the same product, but you're just talking to them individually. So I'd start with her first. Now, some people go, hey, well, you live in Texas, so ladies first is who you talk to. Yes, but it's also because she has more space. So while she's looking around, I'm going to then turn to him and say, what's the most important thing to you while she's thinking about it? So you just learn to start tailoring these things. So using the example of the RV, if they were both coming in to buy an RV, for her, who are you going to go visit? Is anybody going with you on the trip? For him, here's the towing capacity, here's the mileage, here's the payments. Same product, but they're both looking for different features and benefits out of it. So
I love too how you have demonstrated that it can be a proactive skill instead of reactive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love it because like what you saw earlier, I just go and find the person I'm gonna meet with. The very first, the second stage I ever spoke on was Steve Sims. It's called a speakeasy. But I didn't know anybody because we met, I did his podcast and he said, hey, you want to come out and speak? I'm like, yeah. I said, but add me to the Facebook group. He's like, why do you want to be added to the Facebook group? I said, well, because I want to see who's coming. And what I did is I went and said, somebody said, hey, I can't wait to be in San Diego. I took a picture of their face and it was already on Facebook. So I know it's a more recent picture and I analyzed them all. So the funny thing is I'm sitting in the back of the room, and the way Steve's events are set up is you never know who the speaker is going to be. So I'm sitting in the back room and I've got pictures of everybody in there. I finally got up to talk and somebody came back and go, thank goodness. I thought you were like a serial killer because you had all these pictures of everybody with all these arrows pointed at their head. And I'm like, yeah. But the funny thing about it is there was a couple that I walked up, and like I said, I'm an introvert, but I'd studied these people's faces, and I walked up to a guy named Matt and his wife, Lindy. I'm like, oh, hey, how are you guys doing? You know, how many of these have you been to? And they're like, oh, well, we've been to all these. And they said, is this your second or third one? I'm like, no, this is my first one. But it's because I felt like I already knew them because I'd analyzed their face. So rather than walking into an event cold, I felt like I was going to meet with like people I went to high school with. So I just analyzed their faces and, hey, we're not close friends, but I know enough about you to conversate with you. And it changed my life. So I'm going to show one last feature and then we'll end it for today because I don't want to overload everyone. But the eye angles also tell you something about someone. So there's 3 types of eye angles. If someone's eyes angle up, just think they're looking for the upside of things. So when you see that on someone, it's almost going to be like they're smiling all the time. They want to hear about the features, the benefits, why it's the best thing for them, right? They love to hear the positive side of things. On the other side of that spectrum is downward angled eyes. When you see downward angled eyes, and I mentioned before, I used to have this as a kid, they're worried about, well, what if it doesn't work out? Have you thought about this? Kind of like the devil's advocate. So when you see someone whose eyes angle down, they make amazing people to work with if your eyes angle up, because you may overlook and think, oh, everything's going to work out. But we need that person who's always thinking, yes, but what about this? What about that? Right? So I would present differently. If we're going in to present to these groups and I saw that their eyes angled up, when I was talking about the features and benefits, I'd make eye contact with that person. But if I saw eyes that angled down, I said, but you know, the thing about our products is this isn't the first generation of it. This is actually the 3rd generation. These are the things that we learned by having it out in the field and getting feedback and failures. And so then I was speaking to the person who's worried about the challenges. Have you thought about this? Because everybody thinks when a salesperson comes in, they're just going to sell sunshine the entire time. But if somebody's eyes angle down, then you need to talk about the downside of things. So for example, with real estate and loans, right? It could be, well, and some people are interested in putting solar on their house right now. The number one question most people with downward angled eyes have is, well, is it going to damage my roof? So you can address that ahead of time. And go, hey, you know, this is one of the things about doing solar panels. And, you know, look, we've been working on it for a while, so we're not going to damage your roof. We know how to install these so it doesn't do damage. You're not going to have an insurance claim. And then you can move to the positives of it. Or this is the reason we chose this loan for you. Now, look, it's not always the best loan because of these reasons. So if you hear bad things about it, this is why it's still good for you, but this is, you know, what you may hear as a downside. Or same thing with the house. You know, if there's something about the house that they think it's too good to be true, then you can find a flaw in the house and talk about, well, you know, you may have to do this, you may have to do that. Because people who are positive and want to hear the upside, if you talk too much negativity, they shut down. People whose eyes who angle down, you talk too much positivity, they're going to shut down too and think you're just trying to BS me. So you just learn to address their area of concern based on which way their eyes angle.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like I said, we can be here for hours just talking about it. So with that, I know we do have to wrap up, so I'll pop back up just a few more things of how can this be used. So the real way to remember all this is to remember the acronym FACE, and that is find the feature, assess the meaning, convert it from what I want to say to what they best understand it, and then express it back to them. So again, going through it, find a picture, find the person. Ideally, you want a straight on, well-lit picture. Then you assess what features stand out to you or which ones are more important to you. Because that's the whole thing. Just because I teach eyebrows, you may not like eyebrows. You may be concerned with nostril size, upper lip, ear height, ear length, you name it. Find whatever speaks to you about the person. Then start thinking, okay, now that I know this about them, I know what I was going to say, but am I speaking their language or do I need to convert it and then express it back to them in their own language? So it's really easy to remember. FACE, find, assess, convert, and express. And then when you start doing that, it just makes a huge difference to people. And where can it be used? Obviously in sales, negotiations is another one. Staffing. If you learn this, I already mentioned this helped me with my rise from help desk to regional vice president of sales, but it also helps with employee retention, because if you learn to treat people like people instead of a number, it makes an amazing difference. Networking events. So the average, I ran across this study with SHRM. The average employee that makes $60,000 a year, in order to replace them, is going to cost you $30,000 to $45,000 in recruiting and efforts. But then it can be up to $120,000 loss in business productivity. Because even if you get somebody hired fast, you got to train them. They're not going to be effective immediately. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to pull resources, somebody else off another project to help groom them and raise them in the company, right? So that's the impact of, if you learn to treat people with respect and you make them feel seen and heard, they will stay so much longer than they will for a paycheck. There's 4 basic human needs. There's physical safety, emotional safety. People want to feel seen and heard, and people want to feel connected. Well, we can't help with the first 2, but we can help people feel seen and heard and connected by using what everyone's learned today. And then, of course, what I mentioned that I love the most about this is it's a business skill that bleeds over to your personal life, because you can learn to appreciate people in your life that much better just by what we have in common with our faces and what's different. So where do I recommend practicing it? Servers. Why? Because nobody's paying attention to them. They're overworked and underpaid, but they're also the people who have the power to do things for you. So instead of buying the next person's coffee in line, treat the barista for just talk to them for a few seconds. And then they treat the next 25 people better than they would have if you bought somebody else's coffee. I mentioned earlier, in restaurants, I do this with servers and bartenders. And what I'll say is, when I was learning it, look, I took this class, kind of think the guy might have been full of it. Can I tell you what I learned in the class, and you can tell me if it's right or not? And they love it because it's a skill where they can make more money. But this is where the free food and drink comes in. You start doing it. You do it at airports. I've gotten upgraded from a previous flight to the earlier flight and upgraded to first class, because when I went up and talked to him, I looked at their eyebrows. She had rounded eyebrows. I said, hey, look, I'm on the second best seat in the house. I've got exit row on the 8 o'clock flight. I saw that some people weren't being the nicest people to some of your coworkers. I know that they're not responsible for the weather, flights, the staff, you name it. How's everybody doing today? She's like, good. I'm like, and then how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. Okay. I would love it if you could bump me to the earlier flight. Not only did she bump me to the earlier flight, she bumped me to first class. Why? Because I asked about the people around her first, then I made a request for me, and then I brought it back to her. So you can do this all the time. So, and then the last one is, if you go into a hotel, if they have straight eyebrows, hey, can I get an upgrade? If they have angled eyebrows, are you the person that can help me get an upgrade? I'm a diamond member. What's in it for them? What's their angle? And rounded eyebrows. Oh, I've spent so much time in the plane, in the car. It'd be amazing if I could get a room that was, a little bit larger, kind of spread out my legs, or a higher view, making it about the people around them. So all these things, I'm asking for the same thing, an upgrade, but I'm asking it based on their face instead of my desire. So, anyway, with that, I know we kind of went a little bit over today, but I'm passionate about this. I could talk about it all day long. That was the hardest thing about Jim's event. Amazing event, by the way, for that being his first event, and everybody that he had there, man, he deserves a round of applause. But cutting this to 30 minutes was really hard.
I can see why.
Yeah.
So I know we're trying to wrap up, but I do have just a really, to my mind, a very important question.
Sure.
Can we edit our own features to portray ourselves differently?
Yes. So there's several different ways we can do it. Number one, you've been doing it for quite a while. And what I mean by that is women wear makeup to highlight their own facial features. If you look at older women, they will actually draw on with lipstick bigger lips than they actually have, right? What do people do now? Well, we have a lot more access to Botox, plastic surgery, things of that nature. So yes, you can. For men, it's very limited. What we can do is grow out beards. So we mentioned the phrase taking one on the chin. A larger beard says I can handle more things, criticism and adversity with no problem. Women can make their cheeks look wider with blush, enhance their lips, enhance their upper eyelids, you name it. Now, that's quick, short-term things. As a result, if you've ever seen someone who's left something that they're unhappy with, relationship, work, you name it, and they look like a different person, and we say, oh, they're glowing. It's because they stopped frowning and started smiling more. So I'm a good example of, I was really frustrated at the place I was at the last 2 to 4 years, and my mouth started to hang down. And so I had like a downturned mouth, right? Because I always thought, oh, what's going to go wrong today? And as I've over the last year focused on things, my mouth has started to go back up because I smile more. Now I'm still horrible. I need to smile more when I'm on stage because I get the videos back later. I'm like, God, I look like an angry person. But the more smiling, eventually your mouth will turn up versus turns down. So you can make little changes to your face as it's going. When people go from being a very sedentary life to a more active life, their cheeks can actually get wider because the cheek muscle structure here, we're doing a lot of breathing and taking things in. And if you think about what is it that they had a year or two ago, the Jawzerciser. So it was that little piece of rubber that people could bite on to make their jaws stronger, right? So as we make stronger decisions and we literally bite in and hold our ground, our jaws can get larger. So it's constantly changing. You also saw the picture of me when my eyes angled down. I wasn't raised in a negative, bad household. It's just my parents were worried about what if things don't work out. So they said, hey, go for your goals, but what if it doesn't work out? What's your backup plan? What else do you plan to do? Have you thought about this? And so I became a person who thought about the potential downsides more than focusing on my wants. As I got out of that and I got more into personal development and professional success, my eye angles changed over time as well. Now, if somebody goes through something traumatic, loss of a loved one, extreme heartache, something of that nature, those lines can form almost instantly. But most things just take time to do. And that's the whole reason why, not to end on a morbid note, but when we go to an open casket funeral, we don't recognize the person in there. It's because all their muscle tension is gone. And so the face doesn't look like the face we're used to seeing when we all hold that tension in our face.
Interesting. I have actually wondered multiple times why the person in the casket doesn't look, they never look like the person that I know. Wow.
Same when you see someone with a stroke, right? Because you see the muscle on one side of their face and this side just kind of hangs.
Wow. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time today and reinforcing this information to me, sharing it with our group. I mean, I will definitely be reading the books that you recommended. This is fantastic. So we will make sure to post again how people can contact you and the QR code. And really appreciate you and sharing your skill set with us.
Sure. And, you asked the question earlier. The minimum I recommend to people is get the flashcards. But then there's virtual courses, consultants. I get hired out when somebody has to do a business proposal to help analyze the face of who, if it's a big deal. I do group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and I post videos. If you want to learn for free, I post it on all the social media handles we talked about as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great opportunity. Appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much.